and zany.
Copyright claimy.
Animaniacs, those are the facts.
So, the almighty Reboot has decided to come stomp around again, eh? A word that leaves people with uncertainty and unrest. Will it be a comfortable fit that follows in the original's footsteps? Or just deliver a swift, painful kick to fans and non-fans alike? Well, speaking from experience, I totally get why people can feel on edge about this kind of thing. I mean, I've seen reboots of things I loved that turned out pretty bad, reboots of things I never watched that turned out really bad, reboots of things I never watched that turned out great, and... the Bible by which all reboots should be judged!
With wisdom, power, and love, our God is an awesome...
But today's reincarnated specimen is something I only have slight memories of watching. A little cartoon called Animaniacs. For those that currently reside here, Animaniacs was a show back in the 90s that aired on Fox Kids and later on Kids WB. It starred the Warner siblings, Yakko, Wacko, and Dot, as they run around Warner Brothers Studios causing chaos, show up in other time periods to bug famous historical and literary figures, and even educate the masses with earwormy songs on occasion. All the while, a cast of other colorful characters, including a retired cartoon squirrel, mafia pigeons, and a little girl that gives natural selection the finger, all get to go on their own adventures with varying styles of comedy and presentation, while the Warners occasionally run by to escape capture in the background. I can't say that I watched this show religiously as a kid. I was mostly obsessed with OG SpongeBob at the time, but after revisiting some episodes before this video, I gotta admit, it's still got the magic I remember. The well-timed slapstick, the varied humor, the clever shattering of the fourth wall, the integration of the other characters across skits to make everything feel connected, the well-placed and hilarious in hindsight adult gags, and even some moments of genuine heart that made this cast feel like more than just joke dispensers. It really was a cartoon unlike any other, and while some of the references and satire are horribly dated in the current age, the comedy, characters, and overall presentation still have a timeless feel that allowed the show to stand up as a classic in spite of all this. But what happens when you decide to literally dig the Warners up from their 20-year-old graves and bring them to modern day, full of all kinds of technology and trends that they've never witnessed before? Well, the obvious answer would be the complete and total chaos we're used to, but with plenty of new avenues for jokes. I mean, come on, the Warners and company reacting to the current age of social media, celebrities, music, memes, and the entertainment industry as a whole? A reboot like this practically writes itself. And did we end up getting something worthwhile in the end? Mostly yes. With a little bit of no, and a small hint of maybe, depending on the kind of person you are. It's definitely a show that deserves its own in-depth analysis with some obvious comparisons to the original, and that's what I'm gonna do. So feel free to max and relax, go grab some snacks, as I discuss the impacts and setbacks of 2020's Animaniacs. Let's make tracks! So since the Warners have been out of commission for a while, some changes had to be made for their comeback. First and foremost, how the show looks. Obviously no one's doing traditional cell-based animation in 2020, which is quite tragic. So they moved to digital ink and paper for this reboot, and it looks cleaner. Not necessarily better or worse, but definitely a lot cleaner. Lines are a lot thinner, colors are a lot more vibrant, and the overall movement is just a lot smoother. As for the character designs, the obvious first choice was just to use the original designs, but considering that the show was animated by a bunch of different studios back in the day, the question came to which original designs. Eventually they settled on the work of Japanese studio TMS Entertainment, who they agreed had a very unique angular feel to the characters, which allowed for a lot more freedom when animating them. And to pull off this kind of design, they invited Genevieve Tsai, who was currently working at Warner Brothers Studios at the time, and was also a huge fan of the original series. And looking at her art, they all agreed that she was a prime pick to reincarnate the Warners. Also, she worked on the Green Eggs and Ham cartoon. Not relevant to anything, I just wanted to mention that because Green Eggs and Ham deserves way more love than it gets. But we'll talk about that show later, cause trust me, I like it a lot. Do you like Green Eggs and Ham? Yes, I do. Sam, I am. Yes, I do. Yes. Anyway, they worked with Jen to replicate TMS's designs as much as possible, and what they came up with in the end looks pretty dang good. Almost exact, I would say. They've got a little bit of a case of the Megamind forehead going on, but really close to the originals. They also updated the style of the backgrounds, doing their best to make them look like paintings, but avoiding a few relics of the 90s, like too many curves and over-reliance on airbrush. A pretty good compromise, and hey, you can't argue with those results. I'll admit there were some designs specifically for the humans that kinda creeped me out. I get that stylized humans were always a thing in the show, but they're stylized and then there's just kinda ugly. I mean, what the heck is going on with these guys? Ugh. And there were some times when the animation felt kinda slow-paced, even for some of the slapstick scenes where pacing and timing is key. But I ain't gonna diss the art and animation too much, cause hey, this still looks good. And if this wasn't cool enough, they also gave us some drastic visual changes in certain episodes, completely switching up the style of the show for a little bit, like what Gumball used to do. They try a storybook style with bolder lines and more simple shapes, a cutesy chibi style which is as brightly colored and bouncy as it sounds, and of course the old school shonen anime style, which is pretty much free real estate for anyone making a thumbnail for their reviews of this show. So on the visual aspect, very few complaints. Looks good, moves good, and just is good. And the loyalty to the source material is on point and full of effort, which is great to see. But hey, looks are only half the battle. The real question is, can you crazy kids still make me laugh? Short answer, yes. Long answer,
Yes.
if you remember the humor of the original series, the balance was surprisingly perfect considering how much variety there was. There was basically 20% cartoony slapstick, 20% clever wordplay, 20% meta jokes, 20% pop culture gags, and 20% puns. So whether you were a kid looking for cartoon zaniness or an adult looking for more highbrow humor, there was a little something for everyone. Or maybe you're like me who still gets a kick out of all five. I mean, I appreciate some well-written satire, but come on, watching dudes get hit with stuff will never not be funny.
That guy got hit in the head with a coconut!
Also, when they went the route of pop culture gags, it was pretty much a free-for-all. Art, history, TV, movies, books, celebrities, other kid shows, companies, groups, politics, mimes, pretty much everything was fair game, as it should be. It kept the comedy interesting and gave us all something we could laugh at together, no matter what side of the fence we were on. So trust me, this reboot had massive shoes to fill given how much meat there was to the comedy, and yet it soldiered on and took on the challenge, like a champ. We've got goofy versions of historical figures like Surfer Bro Odysseus, who drinks goat's milk like he's cracking open a beer. We've got self-aware humor, like the Warners literally redoing the intro when they say to start at the beginning. Tons of puns, so much so that they engineered a weapon to punish those that say too much. Nostalgic jokes, like callbacks to Yakko's World and some of their older shorts. Some perfect adult jokes, especially from Pinky.
You hate the arts, Brain. You always say that the Renaissance is French for bull.
And just some good old-fashioned misdirection.
Aha! I've got it! This thing makes everything look bigger.
And of course, with Warner Brothers ownership comes Warner Brothers properties being mocked and shown off. For example, the classic Looney Tunes. Bringing them back into the spotlight is a lot like what the DuckTales reboot did for the Disney Afternoon properties like Chip and Dale, Goof Troop, Tailspin, and Darkwing Duck. And I welcome this. It's like having one big happy cartoon universe family thing. It's fun. Plus, we also get nods to WB titans like Harry Potter, DC Superheroes, It, and Jurassic Park. Okay, that last one's not fully a Warner Brothers property, but come on, if you got Steven Spielberg back as executive producer and you don't start the reboot with a Jurassic Park homage, then you just squandered a creative opportunity harder than this guy ever could. I don't want to spoil all the jokes because you definitely deserve to laugh for yourself, but there were plenty of moments in the show that either made me crack a smile or crack a rib, so bravo on that front. It is far from perfect though, as the humor can feel a bit off balance at times. The meta humor is top notch overall, but I do think they make way too many jokes about the fact that they're in a reboot. It must have been like 1 or 2 times per episode. Okay, we get the fact that you're in a reboot, so instead of constantly pointing that out, how about you just focus on being a good reboot, alright? I also noticed a bigger leaning towards political jokes in a lot of these episodes, and some of them are pretty on the nose, particularly in the short Animaniacs. They are self-aware about it at the end, which helps a little, but that's still a third of your 22-minute episode dedicated to those kinds of jokes, and the lack of subtlety might throw a few people off. I did read that the current showrunner for the reboot, Wellesley Wild, is also a writer for Family Guy, so I guess this kind of political humor was pretty much inevitable. And to be fair, there are some political jokes that are really dang funny, like when the Warners do a news report about the US election.
Here I am in Iowa, the state we pretend to care about for 1 January every 4 years.
Oh jeez, first Homestar Runner and now the Animaniacs. I feel so sorry for anyone who lives in Iowa. We don't mean to make fun of you guys. We love you. And your corn. And your fundamentally sound college basketball players. Also, if there's one genre of humor that the Animaniacs didn't need, it's gross out humor. Yeah, while I didn't watch every episode of the original, I don't remember any episodes with gross out, and to see all the really nasty close-ups, the boogery noses, the weird slobbery kissing, Wacko eating a decade-old sandwich, just... ugh. Yeah, that's a piece of the pie I'd be happy to throw away. But overall, I did enjoy the comedy a lot. It had all the laughs, jabs, and especially variety that the original did so well, so you gotta respect it for that. But sadly, there is one aspect of the show where variety is almost non-existent, and if you watch the show, you know what I'm talking about. It's time for another good idea, bad idea. Good idea. Giving the Animaniacs a reboot. Bad idea. Giving the other Animaniacs the boot. The end. Yup, aside from the Warners and Pinky and the Binky, none of the other characters from the original are mainstays in this reboot. Slappy, Skippy, Rita, Runt, Buttons, Mindy, Mr. Skullhead, the Goodfeathers, Katie Kaboom, Minerva Mink, the Hippos, the Mime, that weird kid that talks about Randy Beeman, all gone. I know some people might argue that the other characters were just different devices to deliver jokes, so they're not really needed, but that's not true at all. I feel that each set of characters added something to the show that the Warners and Pinky and the Brain just can't, which truly made it a variety show. Rita and Runt were a lot lighter on comedy, but more heavy on heart, leading to a really cute friend dynamic and genuine tear-jerking scenes. Plus, Rita's songs were a lot more smooth and classy when compared to the bouncy cartoony tunes of the Warners. Slappy and Skippy, the show's best characters in my opinion, had a unique concept that could appeal to both younger and older fans of cartoons. A veteran toon that knows all the tricks of the trade is genius. Kids can laugh at the goofy slapstick, and older people who probably grew up watching Looney Tunes can appreciate Slappy deconstructing the gags and foiling her rivals without breaking a sweat. And the way she constantly looks at the camera and mocks the situation is some great use of meta humor. Like, look, I know how this is gonna play out, you know how this is gonna play out, let's just let this idiot try, what do you say? The Goodfeathers gave us dialogue and character dynamics that appealed mainly towards adults. Segments like Good Idea, Bad Idea, and Mime Time were less than a minute and were a nice fast-paced distraction from the longer shorts. And Buttons and Mindy, honestly, I wouldn't mind if they stayed away. I know the whole baby comically avoiding danger and the pet constantly getting hurt to save them is a comic routine as old as time, but I just feel really bad for Buttons in these segments. I'd rather they just put Mindy in a cage and let the poor puppy rest. The only time these guys appear in the series is in the short Good Warner Hunting, which might be the funniest and best part of the whole season, by the way. I'm not gonna spoil what happens, just go watch it, it's hilarious. And honestly, seeing them fully redesigned and on the screen does give me hope that they could come back someday. I know there might be some issues like Bernadette Peters, the voice of Rita, might be too expensive to be a regular on the show. And Italian mob movies like Godfather and Goodfellas are not nearly as popular as they were in the 90s, so the Goodfeathers might be too outdated. And Minerva? Pfft, forget it. Having that girl just walk around would make studio execs nervous. But I'm still gonna hold out hope. You guys did pretty dang well with varying up the comedy, so how's about adding more variety to the cast in future seasons? I think it would really help the show out. After all, variety is the spice of life. Okay, maybe some cayenne pepper instead. Life is good. As for the characters that are included, they all feel familiar. The Warners are still totally insaney, and Pinky and the Brain are still Pinky and the Brainy, and they're all still as charming and funny as they've always been. I only noticed a few changes. One being that Dot went from the cute sister with a bit of sass to a more aggressive character that tended to lead the siblings more often. In the original, it was usually Yakko who led, which made sense since he's the oldest, and he also wears the pants in the relationship. But here it seemed like Dot is usually the one who takes the reins during their schemes. Not an issue, just something I noticed. It also seems that the writers really wanted to flesh out Pinky and Brain's relationship. In the original, it's obvious that they're friends, and there are some episodes that show it off well, but the reboot actually puts them in many situations where their relationship is tested. In fact, if you watch the segment called Future Brain, it might have the cutest Pinky and Brain moment in the entire reboot. Not in the entire series, I mean, nothing will ever top that freaking Christmas special, but it was still really adorable. And speaking of Brain, he seems to be a lot more expressive than he was in the original. They traded most of his cold, calculated, dry demeanor for more emotive moments like this, and this, and this. It helps give him more personality without taking away from his role as the almighty evil genius. Though for an almighty evil genius, he does make some pretty stupid decisions in this show. Like in 1001 Narfs, how exactly do a bunch of Arabian horses help him take over the world? Is he gonna ransom them, or mutate them, or what do horses have to do with world domination? Or when Pinky records over a video he was gonna send to an alien race, and he just sends the video off anyway. Like, dude, just take an extra day to reshoot and re-edit the video. The world ain't going anywhere. Well, unless Starbucks and his tiny alien buddies finally do us in. Yeah, speaking of which, let's talk about the new characters. They're fine, I guess, but none of them leave nearly as big an impact as the original cast. There's a female CEO that replaces Mr. Plotz, and she exists. She didn't have many appearances that really define her as a character yet, so maybe one day she'll become as memorable as our favorite anger-prone bald man. I mean, this insane-looking face is a pretty good start. That's kind of memorable. There's also this muscular beefcake which talks with the exaggerated Arnold accent. And again, he's fine. An okay foil for the Warners in his 2 appearances, but I wouldn't really care if we never see him again. He's certainly no El Macho, that's for sure. Then there are the characters from the new segments, like the incredible gnome in People's Mouths, which is a gnome that stays in people's mouths and pretty much says what that person is really thinking. It's extremely awkward and not very funny at all. It feels more like a Freakazoid sketch than anything Animaniacs would have ever done, and I'm kinda glad they only tried it once. Props to John DiMaggio for voicing him though, he always does a good job. Then there's the aforementioned Starbucks and Cindy, about a tiny alien that gets kidnapped by a little girl and is desperately trying to contact his buddies to destroy Earth. It's a little bit better, but it also feels very familiar. If you look at the concept of little girl captures tiny genius, there was Mindy and Brain from the original show, and then there was Pinky, Elmira, and the Brain after that. And the only real difference between the 3 girls is that Cindy really likes to ramble. Like, she talks non-stop throughout the entirety of the short, even when she's not on camera. And that wouldn't be too bad if her audio quality wasn't so off.
And then it ran away with the and it stopped in front of the bottle.
Like, did the guy just record his kid talking and then use the camcorder audio? And I thought my show had no budget. But luckily, Cindy's rambles are really the only audio issue I have with this show, because the sound design overall is fantastic. All your favorite voice actors and actresses are back, and their returns are pretty much seamless. Jess Harnell as Wacko, Tress MacNeille as Dot, Maurice LaMarche as Brain, Frank Welker as Ralph, and the almighty Rob Paulsen as Yakko, Pinky, and Dr. Scratch and Sniff. It really does feel like they were slowly getting back into their characters as the episodes went along, because the further I got in the season, the better they sounded, which is awesome. It's obvious that some time has passed and their voices are a little bit lower, particularly Dot's singing voice, but as a whole, it's like they never left. It was nice to hear all those orchestral accents whenever characters did things like run around or hit something. And all those accents you hear were done specifically for the reboot with their own 30-piece orchestra, just like the original. It's a big part of the cartoonish charm that the series had, and I'm glad they brought it back. The sound effects are just as boingy and crunchy as ever, which makes scenes funnier whenever they're used. And the songs, while not as memorable as the original, are pretty dang fun. You've got the Catching Up song from the first episode, which is hilarious, the Suffrage City song, which is pretty catchy, a surprisingly awesome rap battle, and my favorite by far, What If the World Was Cuter? It's basically a cuteness-charged, sugar-packed, genetically engineered earworm, like they did in the Lego Movie 2, and I absolutely love it. There's even a short called Here Comes Treble, where the Warners screw around with the show's composer, and we get animation set to classic pieces like Turkey and the Straw and In the Hall of the Mountain King, leading to some great cartoony chaos set to timeless music. I think I've made it pretty clear that everything here sounds awesome. Aside from maybe the credits song, which sounds like it's falling asleep. You feeling okay there, man? You sound kinda down.
Don't talk to me until I've had my coffee.
So aside from some big misses with some of the jokes and a sorely lacking cast, the Animaniacs reboot is one of the best I've seen in quite a while. Solid animation, nostalgic soundtrack, well-updated humor for the most part, and plenty of wacky, self-aware charm that the original was known for. It's definitely a little rough around the edges since it is the first season, but I feel like the show will definitely find its footing as the seasons go on, just like how the voice actors sounded more in character as the episodes went on. Take notes, all you rebooters and rebootineers. Before you focus on anything in your reimagining, remember that respect for the original material comes first. You don't have to copy everything beat for beat and note for note, but understanding the original and why it was so loved in the first place is crucial when it comes to recreating it. And it will lead to older generations respecting your efforts and newer generations growing up with a great franchise just like you did. So definitely give this show a watch if you haven't already. Pretty much all the shorts have something enjoyable about them, but keep a special eye out for How to Brain Your Dragon, Future Brain, Good Warner Hunting, Gift Wrapper, Here Comes Treble, That's Not the Issue, and Hindenburg Cola, as I think those are some of the best. Also, Benedict the Dragon is 100% valid, and you'll know exactly what I mean when you see him. Just trust me, you'll know. Oh, and when you do know, come back and tell me in the comments, cause I wanna know when you know, you know? Okay, bye.